Good day. I'll admit it's a bit of a cliche, but the start of the year has been a time for reflection so far. So I thought I'd take this chance to share with you 4 things I've learnt on this project so far. And just as a spoiler, there's a lot about balance. So, number 1, openness, perfectionism, and transparency. So one of the reasons why I didn't record one of these vlogs for so long between January and December last year, I think, is that I was really wary of sharing what was still a work in progress. I really like having things clear and well presented, so instinctively I don't like sharing what isn't yet clear either in my mind or in the page, if it's not the finished thing. And I think part of what's behind that is a fear that I'll look like I don't know what I'm doing. And weirdly, I think that's more the case now that I'm running my own project. I am, Dr. Marsh. I feel like I need to look like I know what I'm doing. But on the other hand, it's in those moments that it can be most valuable to get this input. So whilst there's still the opportunity to make changes and take on new ideas. So looking back over the past year, I think I've spent a lot of time thinking over particularly experimental methods by myself, and in hindsight, I think I would have benefited from being more open and having discussions with more people along the way, even if it still was a work in progress and not sort of the finished thing. So, number 2, management style, flexibility and clarity. So again, and there's a bit of a theme here, I like to be very precise about instructions, so it's really clear what needs to be done in a given situation. And that's usually because, being still at a junior stage in my career, I've always been the one receiving instructions. So for me to phrase them in a very precise way is a means for me to check with other people that I actually will be doing what needs to be done. But now it's kind of the first time in my career where I'm sort of regularly giving instructions to other people, and I suppose as part of that, taking on something of a leadership role. And there's been a couple of times in the last year when, in hindsight, I've thought, well, perhaps I should have been a little less descriptive in my descriptions for another person so that they can use their own mind and do their own thinking to do things their own way rather than taking on all that responsibility myself. I think part of that habit also might stem from a slight tendency to assume that everyone else's mind works the same way as my own, which is of course absolutely not true. And that kind of balance, I think, is also relevant to co-creation. So when I was writing the sort of proposal for this project, I had a really strong desire for this to be a co-creation. So obviously, like I have expertise in experimental science, sort of the lab-based academic scientist, and HIT Uganda, our NGO partners, their expertise is very much in sort of the practical applications, the business side, the training part of it. And having both of those perspectives, is really strong. And allows us to sort of create the most effective project we can. So I really like the concept, but it's something that's very easy to say and perhaps not so easy to actually do in practice. And I found this harder than I've anticipated, partly because I do like to have a very firm sense of control over things. And I don't find it necessarily natural or easy to change my mind as often as I perhaps should. So this year I'm thinking of ways to be a little more flexible and open, both in how I give instructions and also going about the process of design and co-creation of projects. So on to number 3, commitment, reflection and decisiveness. I've always liked to think that I've embraced responsibility over what I do, but at the same time there's usually been some kind of safety net. So when I worked in a buildings engineering consultancy, of course I wanted to avoid mistakes and do the best, but at the end of the day I knew there was always other people checking my work, and of course as part of a multi-million-pound company with its own professional indemnity and insurance policies. Likewise, in other research projects I've worked on, I've been part of a bigger group, and although think I've done pretty well in general of sticking to time and budget. Um, I knew that if I really needed to, there were resources that I could fall back on if needs be. And so for this project, it feels quite different. Firstly, because this time I'm the one with that ultimate responsibility. Secondly, if we are to run out of money, then that's it. There's nothing. There's nothing more to fall back on. And so that kind of permeates into the decisions that we and I'm making. So sometimes these can be consequential, like specifying a contract to employ someone for 3 months. That's a quarter of a year of someone's life. That's the big deal. But other times less so. For example, deciding whether to follow either the British or the European standard for the proctor compaction test. Basically, they're the same, and it doesn't really matter. But with so many decisions that need to be made, I find on the one hand, it's helpful to kind of pause and reflect on those and not make impulsive decisions. But on the other hand, I think, especially looking back over the last year, there have been occasions where I've been prone to procrastinate about tough decisions, or particularly decisions which have a complex array of information, and I often felt like I'm not in the right zone to kind of process that, and I've sort of put it off. So this year, I'm hoping to get a bit better at getting that balance between reflection and decisiveness right. And I think what might help with that is sort of talking through some of those decisions with others. So lastly, reflection number 4, communication. Listening versus speaking. Depending on the exact situation and the dynamic thereof, I can have a bit of a boom and bust approach to speaking. So on some occasions, I'll get very excited, animated, and talkative, and as a result of that, not intentionally, but ultimately not actively listen to other people as much as I should. And there's other occasions, particularly in meetings which aren't one-to-one, which I generally find a bit more difficult in general, maybe it's an introversion thing. But in those, I can tend to be quite unassertive at times and not speak up even when I know I have something valuable to contribute. So this is something I'm working on, how to address the balance on sort of in my professional life in general. And with those reflections, that's all from me for this month. Next time I record one of these logs, in the spirit of reflection number 1, I'm planning on sharing some of our current thinking about how to adapt experiments to the age of COVID, even if it is somewhat still a work in progress. Goodbye.